Story 1. Way too many in 10 years of dealing table games. I've seen people lose so much money they cried at my table. I saw people sitting at machines who returned the next day. When I came to work, they smelled of feces. A regular always brought her disabled child in a wheelchair and placed the child next to her while she gambled for almost a day each time. I had a man who clearly had dementia at my table, and even with complaints they still allowed him to play. He could barely make hand signals and kept forgetting we were in the middle of hands. He tipped the beverage server well, so he was massively overserved alcohol. Reports should have prevented this behavior, but nothing changed. The worst incident was a few tables away. A man's girlfriend was trying to get him to leave, and he became so angry, he tried to choke her to death at the table. He ran from security into the woods behind the casino and killed himself. Story 2. I arrived at work and saw the same people still playing who had been there when I left the night before. Story 3. On Tuesday mornings, the casino has barely reopened after the 4-hour weekly cleaning, and people receiving Social Security benefits are already playing penny slots with $10 left over from their budget. Story 4. I worked at a casino over a decade ago. Someone won a small jackpot, about $2,000. When checking her identification for tax paperwork, we discovered that she had put herself on the state's problem gambler self-exclusion list. That meant the casino was obligated to remove her from the building without paying. If she had been recognized, she would not have been allowed inside. While double-checking, the manager downloaded an updated list. We automatically checked against a local copy that could be a few days out of date, and the updated list showed that she had removed herself with sufficient notice, so we paid the jackpot. She proceeded to put every penny of the jackpot back into the slot machine and visited the automated teller machine a couple of times. At the end of her stay, she asked the cashiers to put her back on the self-exclusion list. Story 5. My first December working at the casino where I still work, I was dealing at a blackjack table. A man sat down, placed $1,565 on the table, and told the dealer that his family was about to have a great Christmas or no Christmas. 20 minutes later, the money was gone. He asked the dealer if she was happy with herself and how well the casino must be paying her. I never saw the man again. 95% of our customers are regulars, so I would not be surprised if that had actually been his Christmas money. Story 6. I did not personally witness it, but in late 1999 I helped open the Motor City Casino in Detroit. A month later, an off-duty police officer lost everything and died by suicide on the casino floor. Story 7. Former casino security guard here. A man jumped from the 8th story of the parking garage. Story 8. I was driving cross-country for work and stopped in West Memphis for the night. I went to the casino to kill a few hours. From my machine, I saw a woman playing slots with tears running down her face. I heard her scream and looked up to see that the machine displayed 0, and she began crying uncontrollably. She was shouting that she had nothing left and pleading for her money back. Security removed her. I won $150 and cashed out, but the walk to my car was terrifying. I am not a typical target for mugging, but the desperation on the faces of people was obvious. I will never go there again. Story 9. I worked in a casino. I saw too many people spend ridiculous amounts of money on gambling. Small children were asleep in chairs outside the casino floor because their parents were gambling. A gentleman had a heart attack at a poker table, and other gamblers were angry because we had to stop the games so emergency medical services could arrive. The saddest case was a woman who wanted to cash a check made out to the electric company. She asked if she could scratch out the company name and write in the casino name. I told her we could not do that. Story 10. Not a worker, but back when casino boats actually cruised the river, a man came every Friday night who would grab a $1 poker machine, feed a $100 bill, lay his face down on the machine, and hit the maximum bet. He repeated this 1, 2, or 5 times. Once we saw him do it 10 times. We never saw him win a penny. The cruises were 1 hour and 15 minutes long. His routine took about 10 to 25 minutes at most. He would finish, leave the machine, and take a seat by the gangway exit. Story 11. I worked a variety of positions in casinos over 6 to 7 years. During that time, I saw many funny, sad, and frustrating things. The one that hurt me most was the father of one of my high school friends. He started coming in occasionally when I was 19 and had my first job there. He was an older man in his late 50s to early 60s, but still relatively healthy. He had a lot of money, drove a nice car, owned a nice house, and even flew a small plane for recreation. Slowly, he began to come in more frequently. He gained weight, looked pale and unwell, and drank almost constantly. Turned out his home life was falling apart. He and his son had a massive falling out, and eventually his wife left, taking their daughter. He had nothing left but his money, and even that did not last. He never won anything and seemed to have lost millions during that time. He would stay in the building for days at a time without moving from his machine. Combined with heavy alcohol use, lack of sleep, an aging body, and constant exposure to secondhand smoke, his health declined rapidly. He was friendly at first, but he began snapping at small things and stopped interacting with anyone. I left that job years ago, but sometimes my family returns to the same casino and sees him at the same machine, a husk of his former self. Even now, that is heartbreaking to me. Gambling addiction is a dangerous and terrible thing, and you do not really realize how bad it can be until you see someone you have known your entire life driven to the very brink. Story 12. I worked valet at a casino. One night, we got a car that had been dropped off with the keys left inside, which was normal here. I got in to move it, and it smelled like death. I moved the car and informed my supervisor. He called the police because it smelled like a decaying body. The police came and we opened the trunk. It was full of groceries from 4 months earlier in the Missouri summer heat. It was chicken. The owners came to claim their car and were told not to use the valet anymore. They said the person who normally carried their groceries up to their second-floor apartment had left, and they did not have anyone to help them anymore. So they started going to casinos and eating out every night. They said they did not have the money for this and had no idea where the money came from. I will never gamble or go to a casino after those years working valet. I have many more stories. Story 13. Casino worker here. Winning big can ruin your life. It is like a drug, and I have seen many people chase that high again. They start at higher denomination machines and over time move to $1.50 and 25-cent machines, eventually playing at the lowest level. Story 14. I spent a lot of time in the casino. My dad had a gambling problem. It was sad to watch your hero fall, but he pulled himself out of it. The things I saw were shocking. I saw a blind Chinese man arrive with bodyguards to help him gamble. I saw couples lose all their money and stand there, looking at each other, half in tears. I sat next to a woman who had lost everything and could not bring herself to leave the chair because the reality had not set in. My dad used to hit it big. Once he had me play one machine while he played another. His machine was losing and mine started winning big. I was shoved off that seat so fast. I do not miss that place. It is full of greed and misery. Story 15. I am not a casino worker. I was at a bar on the casino floor when an elderly man in a suit and hat sat down a few seats away and started talking to the bartender. They made small talk, and then he mentioned that his wife of 50 years had died of cancer a few weeks earlier. He said they never had children and did not have many friends, so he took all the savings they had and came to Las Vegas to have some fun until the money ran out, and then he would go home to be with his wife. The bartender did not follow up, but just kind of let him drink. I awkwardly kept scrolling on my phone. What do you even say to that? Story 16. A customer walked up to me while I was a slot attendant, holding 4 quarters in his open palm. He asked if I knew of any machine that might be ready to pay out. He said he had driven a little over 2 hours to get to the casino and that this was literally all the money he had left. He had not bothered to fill up his gas tank and did not have enough to get home. The best I could tell him was that one bank of machines had several decent payouts, but even slot attendants do not know when any particular machine will hit. I was called away to another customer. I don't think he even won enough to buy gas. Story 17. A couple of people jumped from the top of the parking garage every few years. A man hanged himself in the bathroom. Security and maintenance saw a lot more than I did as a slot technician. I only heard about it. I did not walk in on it. Story 18. When I was single and childless, I had a lot more money, so I frequented the casino. I once saw an infant in a car seat, covered in a blanket and moving around in an unattended car in the parking garage. Security had already been alerted, and the parents were found inside at the slot machines. They were arrested, and the story made the news that night. I shook my head. Story 19. Not a casino worker, but still a sad story. Decades ago, I managed an apartment portfolio, and one of the properties was in Las Vegas. This was before the days of paying rent online. We had a zero cash collection policy, but the property manager told everyone it was lifted for the month to help boost collections. The perfect storm happened on a Friday with many paydays. She collected about $80,000, roughly $150,000 in today's money, in cash for rent, then went to a casino and bet it all on red. She thought she would double it, deposit the $80,000 on Monday, and no one would ever know. She did not win. When Monday came, I saw the money had not reached the bank and called the property. No one had seen the manager. Alarm bells rang in my head and I flew to Las Vegas. We eventually found her at a man's house and called the police. It was a foolish decision. Story 20. Oh man, I have a ton from my 15 years as a casino manager, but I will just write a few and come back later. A woman who was an anesthesiologist assistant hit a bad beat jackpot at a 1-2 no-limit Texas Hold'em table for around $120,000. For non-poker players, this is the lowest stakes no-limit Texas Hold'em game offered by most poker rooms. The buy-in range in our room was from $100 to $300, so by poker standards not terribly high. After she hit the jackpot, she started playing bigger games, first the 2 to 5 no-limit game with a $200 to $1,000 buy-in, and then moving up to the 5 to 10 no-limit game with a $500 minimum. I believe at the time there was no maximum. Next, she was out playing in the high-stakes blackjack pit at $100 a hand. She was bumped up to a black card quickly from all the blackjack she was playing. Within 2 months, we did not see her as often. A few players asked if we had seen her. A couple said she had borrowed money from them and had not repaid it. She started showing up late at night wearing a baseball cap and sunglasses and playing slot machines. Shortly after, security determined that she had been living out of her car and sleeping in the parking garage. The fall went quick. It was like the lottery winner horror stories I had seen on television, but playing out in real time. Story 21. I was a casino worker for 20 years. I have seen a lot of things, but this one stands out. I was the games manager on shift when a woman in her 40s was playing blackjack. She had been there for a few hours, had made several trips to the automated teller machine, and her buy-ins were into the thousands of dollars. I was doing paperwork in the pit when a dealer called me over. The dealer said the woman had been crying shortly before, and she was at the automated teller machine again. I kept an eye on her, and after she lost a few more hands, I could see tears. She was silently crying while playing. I went up and, as discreetly as possible, asked if she was okay and offered help through our partnered addiction help program. She looked me in the face, became angry, and said she was fine and to leave her alone. She was making staff uncomfortable, and it was clear she was crying more as she continued to play and lose. I decided to ask her to leave for the night and paid for her taxi home. I tried again to offer information about organizations that help with gambling, but she was not interested. Addiction is heartbreaking to see, and I hope she was able to get help. Story 22. I am not a casino employee. I used to work at a bank. A customer asked about her account, so I reviewed her statement and saw frequent $2,000 withdrawals at a nearby casino. In the statement I was looking at, there were over $10,000 in withdrawals, and the customer's total account balance was around $60,000. I reviewed earlier statements and found she had sold a house and received about $700,000 less than a year earlier, then steadily gambled almost all of it away month by month. It was one of the most depressing things I saw at the bank. Story 23. I am not a worker, but I saw a man try to bet his prosthetic arm in Las Vegas. Story 24. My father was a security guard at a casino for 15 years, and he has stories. When he started working there, the chairs at the slot machines were made of cloth. They had to change them to vinyl because people would not get up to go to the bathroom and would urinate and defecate on the chairs. People would sneak children into the hotel in luggage when children were not allowed on the premises. Others left children in their cars in the parking garage. One man took out a loan against his house to gamble and lost everything. He died in the casino. People would literally spend days gambling in the same clothes. People would beg at highway exits, pretending to be homeless, and use the money to gamble. There are many more stories. Clarification. The casino where my father worked did not allow children on the premises. If another casino allows children, that is their policy. Story 25. I am a former craps dealer. I have seen people turn $100 into $10,000 in an hour, and then lose that $10,000 plus $500 back to the casino in 3 or 4 hours. Even after I told them to put some black chips in their pocket and not take them out until they reached the cashier. Story 26. Former cage supervisor. In the span of a month, 2 people committed suicide by jumping from the top of our 6-story parking garage. The saddest part was that when it happened a second time, the staff reacted with indifference, saying, "Really? Again? That's inconvenient." Story 27. I lived in Las Vegas for 6 years. All my jobs except the last were in casinos. I have seen some terrible things. The tamest was at my first job. We did not work directly for the hotel. We just leased space there, so we could cash our paychecks at the cage. One payday, a coworker cashed his check on a break, hit the tables on his way back, and came back 20 minutes later having lost it all. This was not minimum wage, it was a tattoo shop and he was an artist, so we are talking about a check for thousands of dollars. He just laughed and waited a couple of weeks before doing it again. At another job, not gambling related, I worked at a nightclub in one of the casinos. A woman waiting to enter the club was already extremely drunk and squatted down and urinated and defecated right there in line. It was full-on diarrhea. At a third job for a downtown casino, I would start my day walking the property, including the casino floor, and end it the same way. I frequently saw the same people on both walks, sometimes days in a row, and each time they looked worse. It was awful. This last story is secondhand from my last non-casino job driving for Uber and Lyft. I picked up a friendly older man. I do not remember where I took him, but I think he was local. We talked about gambling, and he told me about a friend of his, a retired police officer who moved to Las Vegas with his wife. Within 4 months, his $400,000 pension was gone. It was a miracle his wife did not leave him. Story 28. I worked in a casino for 35 years. I believe every one of these stories. I don't know if they are all true, but I've seen it so many times that nothing really surprises me anymore. It's truly sad. Story 29. One of the saddest things I have seen was a regular patron who had clearly lost more than money. He came in frequently, always chasing his losses, and his gambling habit had taken a toll on his personal life. Over the months he became more withdrawn, and his clothes and demeanor showed signs of neglect. It was heartbreaking to watch someone lose not only financially but also in terms of well-being and relationships. Story 30. I was at the casino one night and a man was on a decent tear. I saw him hit a string of jackpots worth between $1,200 and $3,000. At one point he was up about $7,000. He tipped the floor staff $100 to $200 for each jackpot he won. I went with $1,000 to play, and at $2 a spin I stayed for 5 or 6 hours. I watched this man completely tank. He moved from machine to machine, putting hundreds of dollars into each. He was not a high roller, just a regular person. Just as I was finishing up, with about $750 to take home, one of the floor workers approached him and said, "So I see you're having a run of bad luck. I would really hate it if you went home with less money than what you gave us." He replied, "Oh, I'll get it back, don't worry." Within about 20 minutes, he withdrew 3 separate amounts of $1,000 each from the automated teller machine. He left about the same time I did, having given around $1,000 to $1,500 to floor staff in tips, losing the money he arrived with, and at least another $3,000 on top of that. A few minutes later, I walked to my car and saw him smashing the steering wheel of his truck and screaming. Story 31. I worked in a standard United Kingdom city casino with fairly strict limits. I once saw a person lose their house over the course of a short summer. There was not much excitement, just a general sadness and anger among the regulars. Story 32. I'm not a casino worker, but I once saw a woman stage an impromptu intervention on her father at a blackjack table. I was playing at a table with all veterans at Potawatomi Casino in Milwaukee. We were all doing well, laughing and talking, except one man to my right who was playing the table minimum and losing. A woman came up to his right and grabbed his shoulder. She said, "I knew I would find you here. You said you were going to get groceries. How did you even get here?" He said, "Your uncle brought me," and her uncle waved from a table over. She said, "You have kids at home relying on you. How could you do this again? Come on, we're going home." He said, "Okay, fine, but I'll just come back later," as he cashed out about $30 and sulked away. As if on cue, the 5 remaining men at the table pushed their chips in and cashed out. I still think about that family 15 years later. Story 33. I lived about 2 city blocks from a riverfront casino. Gamblers regularly left their children, including infants, in their cars while they played the tables. Often when I walked my dog along the river, I found lonely men, usually sobbing with their heads in their hands. Story 34. I was a supervisor in a casino. Any win of $10,000 and 1 cent or more had to be paid in person with a security supervisor. Wins of $25,000 or more had to be paid by check. Checks could be cashed for up to $50,000. A guest won $125,000. He cashed out $50,000 and then put it all back into the machines that night. He wagered the remainder over the next month. He was a man who could have used that money to improve his life. Story 35. I was a scuba diver at a Las Vegas hotel. We started at 3 a.m. to get the tanks cleaned before guests arrived. My diver was in the tank and I was spotting. I noticed a lot of commotion and emergency medical services going into the club across the hall in the casino. About 20 minutes later, they came out with a man strapped down tightly, laughing like the Joker, his face covered in dozens of thin razor cuts. He was actively bleeding and his face was totally disfigured. It was so surreal. I will never forget that laugh. Story 36. I have several stories. I worked as a cashier and a slot attendant for 5 years. The worst was when a man sat at a slot machine with a bewildered, shocked look on his face. I asked if he was okay and offered him water. He just looked at me and said, "I need help. This just isn't fun anymore." I radioed my manager and asked him to bring a casino host, then sat with the man. A casino host could not solve the problem, but he could take the man to a quiet area to talk. My manager came by. I introduced the player and said, "This man is having a hard time. Can we go somewhere quiet and talk?" The manager took over. I felt so bad for him. He was quietly crying in desperation, facing whatever realization had just happened to him. As a cashier, my first Christmas Eve there was the first time I had ever worked on Christmas Eve in my 28 years. It was also the first Christmas I had not been with my family. Around 8 or 9 p.m., a woman came to my window and asked for $250 in quarter tokens. This was several years before paper tickets. I handed them over and she said, No, you have to put some extra luck on these. I need to win. I haven't bought my children anything for Christmas yet." I tapped the tokens twice, wiggled my fingers toward them, squinted my eyes and said, "Done. That was all the luck I brought tonight." The woman was thrilled. She was sure she would hit the jackpot for her children. Another cashier sat with me at dinner break and told me it would get easier after that. She was wrong. One more was a woman who had just won a $5,000 or $10,000 jackpot on a dime machine. It was clear she did not want it. She had been banned for gambling addiction and behavior. She begged us to forget we had seen her and to give the win to someone else. She just wanted to play. Unfortunately, the law prevailed. Gaming officials handcuffed her and arrested her. Another case involved an employee who was caught stealing tips meant for the slot attendant. The way casinos handle theft is interesting. They document it, save the video evidence, and add it to a report. Once an employee steals enough, I believe $500, it becomes a state felony. Technically, Every non-player penny inside a casino is state property because casinos are state-regulated, similar to banks. They caught the coworker stealing tips. One day she was coming on shift and counting into her jackpot payout bank when gaming officials stopped by and spoke to her. Gaming officers are not friendly when they have to leave their office. Everyone in uniform stopped and stepped back, and they loudly read her rights. She was arrested and publicly called out in front of the people she had been stealing from. Story 37. My ex was from a suburb outside Las Vegas. When she was about 7 and her dad was absent without leave, her mom would take them to his favorite casino and send her and her brother out to play a game called Go Find Daddy. Story 38. At a video poker casino, I worked the graveyard shift from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. One night we were robbed at gunpoint. About 5 people were there playing. The robber disarmed the security guard and forced everyone to lie on the ground. They took what they wanted and fled. I was sitting in the cage, smoking nervously and waiting for the police. The 5 players got up and returned to their games. The police questioned them while they continued playing. I talked with the police and my boss while officers dusted for fingerprints, and other customers kept coming to exchange money. I quit the job the next day. Story 39. I was not a casino worker, but in the 1990s, when I worked part-time at a gas station, we had a few regulars who stopped in every Friday and gambled away most, if not all, of their paychecks. They played the daily numbers and mostly scratch-off cards. They ranged from a stonemason to an emergency room nurse, hard-working people with families. It was sad. To make things worse, the owner would extend credit, which is highly illegal. This is why I never gamble. I cannot believe how far we have gone with sports betting. It is utterly devious. People are buying in, and it was already ruining so many lives. Story 40. 15 years in the casino on the food and beverage side. I have seen people defecate and urinate on themselves so they did not have to leave a machine. They defecated in the buffet line and rolled it down their pant leg so they would not lose their spot, completely unbothered by their actions. I have more stories of people defecating and urinating than I care to share. I have seen people get an opportunity to buy a home and then discover they could not get a loan because 95% of their income had gone into the casino for years. Someone died and people tried to step around the barrier or even over the body to get to the free soda machine because they could not care less. Fentanyl training had to be given to my team in case someone found a suspicious substance on the ground. I am glad we did that as a company, but sad it was necessary and common. Someone threw themselves off the parking structure. Someone started a car chase and ended it in the valet area, essentially suicide by cop. That was not really the casino's fault. Do not get me started on the handling of coronavirus disease 2019 both before and after the closure. Needless to say, I am long gone from that world. I never gamble. Story 41. I'm not a casino worker, just someone who likes casual gambling. The first time I was at a casino, the woman in front of me at the ATM took out her last $5 and paid a fee of $9.95 to get it. Her account balance flashed on the screen as she walked away. It almost made me want to go home. Story 42. Not a casino worker, but during my freshman year of college in the mid-1990s, I drove out with a friend to meet some others at a reservation casino. My friend started the night by withdrawing $300 each trip from the automated teller machine. After about his 3rd trip, I said we had to go, but he refused and became unpleasant. I stayed for a while and then caught a ride home. By the 2nd quarter of the school year, I learned he had left school. He had blown his entire student loan at the casinos and could not afford to stay. I do not think he ever came back. Story 43. I was in Atlantic City 20 years ago. It was midnight, and there were several small children sleeping on coats outside the casino floor, with some alone in the bathroom. Story 44. A woman came to my casino on a bus day trip and never went home. She gambled until everything she had was gone, then sold her house to a con man and gambled that money. The last time I saw her, she was begging on the sidewalk. I never found out what happened to her, but I never forgot her. It broke my heart. I tried to convince her to go home, but she was either in the early stages of Alzheimer's or had dementia, and nothing reached her. Story 45. My mom works at a casino. She was walking through the tables when a man in front of her pulled a gun from his pocket and shot himself in the head. The gun landed a couple of feet from her. This made me realize she has never really mentioned it. I should check to be sure there are no lingering issues. Story 46. If you ask a casino or hotel what one of their biggest maintenance problems is, they will tell you it is the plumbing. Some guests wear diapers to stay at gaming tables or slot machines and then flush them, which clogs the pipes. Story 47. A friend of mine got divorced after his wife frequently played slot machines at the grocery store. She would buy $50 worth of groceries and receive $100 cash back to use for gambling. Several times a week, he wondered why the grocery bills were so high when there was relatively little food in the house. Story 48. I am not a casino worker, but I saw a video of someone at a virtual slot machine transferring $20,000 directly from their bank account into the machine. With automated teller machines, there is at least a small chance the person will stop and think before withdrawing the money, but when the transfer can be made at the machine, there is no such pause. Story 49. I was playing poker at a tribal card room. A 20 to 25-year-old man at the table was terrible, and all the other players loved him. As he rebought chips for the third time while I was there, he said he had just been laid off from the local factory and had come to the casino with his severance check. Suddenly, I was far less interested in playing with him. A few minutes later, he busted again and didn't rebuy. He was quiet as he stood up and left. Story 50. I worked for a gambling control agency in my state. The saddest thing I ever saw was a woman who entered a casino still wearing a hospital gown because it was her first stop after being released. Story 51. I used to live in Las Vegas when I was young. My stepdad would randomly gamble his entire paycheck. One time he gambled his whole paycheck, borrowed money from his mother, gambled that too, and then made me help invent a story about losing his wallet and someone stealing the money. Those were not fun times. Story 52. I worked in a tribal casino for a little over 7 years. One evening a fight broke out between two men. The older man was in his 60s. When he got up to use the automated teller machine, his chair was free and open to anyone. A younger man in his 20s sat at the machine and began gambling. The older man returned, started yelling, and confronted the younger man. The younger man punched him in the face and knocked him down. The younger man ran out of the casino. The older man died from the punch. He lost his life over a machine, and the younger man will likely spend the rest of his life in prison. It was a sad ending for both. Story 53. Everyone at the casino is trying to win, but the sad truth is that people become addicted to losing. The high comes from the anticipation, not the win itself. That is why people do not leave when they win. I used to perform shows at casinos. Once I watched a man lose $5,000 at a craps table in under 30 minutes. He made large bets and kept pushing them to stay active even without a point. It was sickening to watch him lose so much so quickly. I was making simple bets and paid close attention to his play to learn what not to do. A few days later at another casino, I watched someone lose $20,000 in under 30 minutes. He looked like he could afford it, but his face showed that he could not. Story 54. I was at Mohegan Sun during the Kentucky Derby last year or the year before. It was the race where the massive underdog won, with odds of about 1,000 to 1. I saw an older gentleman walking the casino floor, dressed to the nines in the usual Derby style, a full suit and vest and a dress hat, with an expression of absolute shock and despair on his face. I will never forget it. I felt so bad for whatever he was going through. Story 55. There were women who tried to sell their jewelry in the bathroom to get money to keep playing. A little boy called for his mother from the edge of the gaming floor. A man called his child from the table with a lie about why he could not be at his birthday party that day. A man died at the table, and a player waiting for a seat stepped over him. I could go on, unfortunately. Story 56. I wish the man who worked the blackjack table at the casino my father frequented would respond with stories about him. My father had a successful plumbing and sewer company in Miami. If it had not been for his gambling addiction, we would probably be millionaires, and I would have taken over the now defunct company. My sister told me that he won $10,000 and then lost it all plus about $15,000 more in one night. I feel for anyone who has this horrible addiction and for those affected by it. Story 57. My girlfriend used to work in the gift shop at a casino. People would come in with feces and urine in their pants and have to buy new clothes. They were not disabled. They just did not want to get up from their slot machine even if it meant soiling themselves. There were other stories like people being stuck at the casino with no money to get home, begging her and her coworkers to make phone calls or to lend change so they could catch a bus. Sad stuff. Story 58. Several stories stand out. People went to the bathroom or vomited on themselves just so they could keep playing the machines. A woman sold her car in the parking lot for $200 just to keep playing. The worst was this. A woman called the police on 3 men who were standing between her and her car, in which her 10-year-old daughter sat. She hit one of the men so hard with her shoe that he lost 2 teeth. The police were called. It turned out she had been exploiting her daughter for $20 per hour so she could gamble. She had offered her daughter to the 3 men for $40 for an hour if they paid up front. The men were protecting the child from her until the police arrived. The daughter told police that her mother had been doing this for over a year. I never learned what happened afterward. Gambling addiction is as serious as any drug addiction. Do not take it lightly. Story 59. Do you want to hear about the man who looked at mashed potatoes labeled mashed potatoes? Then looked me dead in the eye while gesturing toward them and asked, "What is this?" He was a white man with an American accent. How has he never seen mashed potatoes before? This was in 2008 and it has stuck with me. Or about the man who literally lost $125,000, and the casino gave him a hotel room and a free buffet meal. He was a very unhappy customer. Story 60. I always felt bad that I lost $500 at a casino one day, and that was the only time until I read these stories. Jesus. Story 61. I am going with my girlfriend to Las Vegas for a week in September. I have no issue with gambling and have never lost more than $50 before calling it quits. She has never gambled. I am going to take your advice and leave the credit cards and most of the cash in the room, just in case she catches the gambling bug and neither of us recognizes it. Story 62. Not the saddest, but I watched the Louis Theroux documentary about Las Vegas. It showed a couple of men who were each more than $20,000 down during their visit. They kept insisting they could win at blackjack. Nope. Story 63. I was on the swing shift as a security guard. I walked past a pale, elderly man leaning awkwardly in his chair with his mouth slightly open. I checked on him verbally, and the man playing the machine next to him waved me off and said he was just sleeping. I ignored him. There was no response from the pale man, so after failing to find a pulse, I called for medical help on the radio. Other guards rushed in. We pulled him from the chair, opened his shirt, and hooked him up to the automated external defibrillator I had run to get. It delivered a few shocks. Emergency medical services arrived and transported him to the hospital. The man who had dismissed my concerns continued playing the machine a few feet away the whole time. My manager told me something horrible. Emergency medical services asked that man if he wanted to ride to the hospital with the patient. He huffed and cashed out his voucher. My manager told me the dismissive man was the patient's brother. I believe surveillance had pulled their details from their player cards, which track a lot of information. He was so fixated on the flashing lights that his brother being defibrillated and taken to the hospital seemed only an annoyance. The hospital always notified us if patients they admitted survived. The man survived and I received a gift card. Story 64. I worked as a floor attendant at a casino during graduate school. I saw 2 people with diabetes flop over in their chairs and die because they would not get up to eat or take their insulin. I saw several people urinate and defecate themselves rather than leave their machines. The money factor is tragic as well. One man stands out to me because he had been playing my entire 8-hour shift and had arrived long before I did. I knew he was not winning, but I had lost track of how much money in checks I had cashed for him. By the end of my shift, he became frantic and then started to cry. He told me he had spent his daughter's entire college savings and then some, around $80,000. It may not sound like much compared with other amounts, but it was rural West Virginia in 2006. No one in that area had or has that kind of money. As someone who was accumulating student debt at the time, that one hit me hard, and I felt awful for the strain it was going to put on his relationship with his daughter if he even had one after that. Story 65. It is not really sad by the time you notice. The sadness is obvious the first day you spend time in a casino. The first thing that strikes you is the smell. It comes in layers. Cigarette smoke, even where smoking is banned. The smell of stale, cheap liquor, and the odor of unwashed humanity. Sweat, urine, flatulence, bad breath, and that unmistakable old person smell. These odors come equally from the casino and the clientele. Then there is the sound or lack of it. Despite a crowd gathered for entertainment, there is no cheering or laughter, only the maddening din of gaming machines shouting over each other. Players stare, zombie-like, into the screens. Security watches silently. People mill among the machines in silence. It feels like a cubicle farm. And the sights. Casinos are dressed up like a combination of resorts and theme parks, but they lack the excitement and the people those places have. You do not see happy families, students on gap years, or Swedish travelers. Instead, you see ragged, worn-out people in pajamas shuffling to disappear into the machines, set against bright colors, blinking lights, patterned carpet, and polished uniforms. All this changes your impression quickly, often on the first or second visit, before you even see something truly terrible. The place sells vice and caters to beaten-down people who indulge. It is part of a delivery mechanism. They take money and provide products, alcohol, and gambling. People come to feed an addiction, not to play. If they win, they only win a chance to play more. You come, buy your loss, buy your liquor, go home, and come back tomorrow. It is so mind-crushingly mechanical and miserable that when the misery manifests, it only confirms what you already suspected. Story 66. I was a bartender in a local casino. Many, especially older patrons, would sit at my bar 8 to 10 hours a day, feeding money into the bar top machines while talking about their homes being foreclosed on and their utilities being shut off. They received free soda, coffee, and juice, yet after feeding all that money into the machines they told me they could not tip because they had to watch their money, not even $1. I had to quit because the whole scene went against my principles. One day my next-door neighbor asked me to lend him $300 because his machine was getting ready to hit. He said he was trying to win money to pay his light bill. I refused. Story 67. I live in a city with many casinos. I have been 3 times. I am 34. I only ever play about $40. I figure that with the free drinks I will almost break even. Once I cashed out $400. Another time I cashed out $200. The last time I lost the entire $40. I have been heartbroken ever since and refused to step foot in a casino again. I also sat next to an elderly Chinese man who was playing blackjack for $1,000 a hand. He lost $40,000 while I sat and watched. Story 68. I have a couple of stories. A player came in and played 2-2 limit hold'em every day for 4 months. One day he got up, picked up his chips, and asked me where the cage was. He had lost every buy-in during that time, and this was the first time he had anything to cash out. At a table 2 over from where I was dealing one night, a man suffered a fatal heart attack. As paramedics tried to resuscitate him, the other players at the table yelled at my coworker to hurry up and deal the next hand because it's not like he's coming back to play. I was not personally there for this one, but a friend was dealing a game where someone lost a lot. He unzipped his pants and urinated on her under the poker table. After they removed the man, the floor manager told her she could go home if she wanted, but they would appreciate it if she would go up to one of the hotel rooms, take a shower, and then come back because they were shorthanded. Story 69. My husband worked in sales at a casino for 2 years. He told me many stories of suicides. Worse, in my opinion, are his stories of having to call people to offer them complimentary perks for being top-tier members. Many of these people told him they had a gambling problem and needed to stay away from casinos, yet his job was to pressure and manipulate them with free hotel stays and other offers to get them back into the casinos. He quit because of this cruelty. Story 70. I used to work at a casino, And the biggest problem with gambling I ever saw was my mother. My parents always had separate checking accounts, but when I was about 12, we had to move in with my grandparents. I did not know at the time, but a few months earlier my father had given her access to his account to pay bills. She spent nearly $100,000 in 2 months playing slot machines. About a year later, my grandfather died and my father inherited about $90,000. A few weeks later, the account was drained. She had been calling out of work and playing slot machines all day. A few years later, my aunt died and left my father around $300,000. Again, she blew through most of it within a week before my father stopped her. I am not sure I would have put up with it if I were my father, but he gave her an ultimatum and they have been together for 39 years. I also gave money to my mother for cell phone bills and similar expenses, and she would spend it at the casino. I estimate she spent roughly $700,000 over the years with nothing to show for it. My father recently had a heart attack, and she is now the only source of money. She has been paying bills and taking care of him. A few years ago, he might have died because she would have spent money only at the casino. Story 71. I am not a casino worker, but my parents are addicted to gambling. I live on the Gulf Coast. My parents live in the Midwest. My daughters are 2 and 4, and they only recently met my parents for the first time very briefly in a casino lobby, because MGM Resorts offered to fly my parents down to Biloxi, Mississippi, and give them a hotel room and free play credits. After we put the kids to bed, my wife told me to go to the casino and have fun. I withdrew $150 to play a few slot machines and to spend some time with my parents. It was around 10:30 p.m., and my machine hit for a little over $1,500. I hit the collect button and told my mom, "I'm done. I expected to lose all the money I brought, and I'm going to use this to cover the trip and buy new clothes for my daughter's upcoming school year." My mother became upset and said, "It's only 10:30. Live a little. You're on a hot streak. If you keep playing, you could turn that $1,500 into $3,000. I said no. My kids will be up at 6:30 a.m. And I can't afford to lose sleep or stay out late. The probability of winning 10 times the money I came with is far lower than I could reasonably expect, and the odds of winning more than I already did are much smaller. I'm taking my chips and cashing out." My mother then had some choice words and became unhinged, saying things like, "There you go with that math stuff." Even though my major is in mathematics and computer engineering, she added, "Oh, look at you, so educated, and you know how all these machines work." That was hurtful. This is why I hate casinos. They destroy people. The only upside is that when my parents pass away, they will likely have little left because the majority of their wealth has been transferred to the casinos. Thankfully, both my sister and I are successful, and sorting out their estate will probably be more of a burden than a windfall. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.